Welcome, everyone. You're in the right place to get an overview of IMAGINiT Clarity Owner Data Portal for 2019.1 for Revit. Your presenters are Joe Eichenseer and Peter Costanzo. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jana, and thank you, everybody, for taking some time out to join us here today. This voice is the voice of Joe Eichenseer. I'm the voice you're going to be hearing the most of, so because of that, I get to have the big picture. Joining us today, we've also got Peter Costanzo, who's the director of our facilities management team. Peter, quick intro for yourself.
And I'm Peter Costanzo. I know some of you on the call, and I'm laughing. Joe is literally doing about 99% of today. So I told him he should make my picture as little as possible. He got there partially. But Joe, this was a more technical discussion. And for those of you who know me, Joe's a little bit more technical than I am.
Just a wee bit. And really, the intent is we'll be getting through here fairly quick overall. We won't be taking a full hour to go through here, but we want to take a little bit of time and cover a little what's new in the .1 release of Clarity 2019.1. So along those lines, we'll start with just a little bit of review of where we've been over the last few releases, and then cover some of the different themes that we've got for this point release here. The different elements that you can see right now. BIM 360 design support being one of the primary things we were working on for this release, and we'll talk in the details of why and what coming forward to that. So from there, just straight into it all, Clarity ODP has been around for a little while. We originally released Clarity, the ODP module, Owner Data Portal module, in 2015. Clarity has been around for years before then, but that's when ODP really made its first, picture into the Clarity world. Starting to move forward and getting different versions of Revit Server, adding some support for collaboration for Revit, different things with model metrics, which helps you understand the health of a Revit file that you might be taking into your environment, support for different types of file sharing mechanisms, Dropbox, Box, SharePoint, and just really working on different elements with Clarity to help out with, in a large part, the data aspects. Some places where we're getting better ways that we can work with Clarity to perhaps input data, other places where we're looking at that validation and the different metrics of the health of the Revit file, or is it the correct data. So that's the overall trend that we have leading up to the point of the .1 release that we've got here today. Now, the overall Clarity environment that we have, the solution stack that we've got, is just a little bit of a reminder through here, is a few different things. We've got the base Clarity product itself that sits below and runs everything, and then there are more than just the ODP module that's sitting out there. There is a module for project-wise integration for those typically engineering firms that need that piece. There's a security module with some different connectors that provides a VPN connection working with Autodesk Revit Server for a secure, non-cloud-based file sharing. And then off on the right-hand side in red, we've got all the different pieces for what we've got on task servers that are doing all the different pieces of automation, of running elements that say, let's go through and extract information to the SQL database. Let's go ahead and run a task that says generate a bunch of PDFs for me so I've got an up-to-date set of documentation that I can take and send wherever, whatever those different things might happen to be. So as we said, though, we're going to be focusing in on just the Owner Data Portal component, which is really all of what's Clarity new, along with just the module. So that being said, if we're looking at one of the primary focuses that we had, it was just for support and different versions of support. So we know we've got various owners, not design and engineering firms too, but various owners that are required for any number of reasons to not be using, we'll say, Revit 2019. You might have to be using an older version of Revit for compatibility with internal systems, or you just haven't gotten around. There's been other busy things in your life that you haven't gotten around to making that update. So we are providing support for natively Revit 2016 through 19, and with 2019.1, we also have limited support for Revit 2015. And there's some monkeying around that we have to do for that to be able to get some different types of task servers going in for that. But suffice it to say, if you need to be using Clarity ODP for any number of things, we can support all the way back to 2015, whatever you need for your for your environment. So going from there and working into what's next, if that's the support that we have for just the native Revit piece, when we're talking about compatibility and support for other things cloud-based, we get into a little bit of a background history here. For, in particular, the Autodesk Cloud. In older versions of Revit, we'll say 2017, well, actually 2015 through technically 2018.3. There's a cloud collaboration service that you can get from Autodesk called Collaboration for Revit. And with that, you have the ability to have any number of different people working anywhere there's an internet connection on this Revit file that's sitting up in the cloud, in this Autodesk Collaboration for Revit environment. And every once in a while, when you chose to, you could say, hey, let's publish from this working model into this Collaboration for Revit website so people that don't use Revit can get access to see the model, to do some markups, to print from there if we needed to, download different things. It just gives us an interface to be able to work with that cloud model for your non-Revit users. There's a mobile app for it, all sorts of fancy things that can happen, but that's the way things used to work. And we've been compatible with that for quite some time. And we know that not all of our owners are using the Autodesk Cloud, but we've got some that are. And so we want to make sure we're working with it appropriately. So flash forward a little bit, and just relatively recently, within the last year or so, Autodesk added in this, or changed, we'll say, what was Collaboration for Revit, the next version of it, the upgraded version of it is now going to be called, instead of Collaboration for Revit, is now BIM 360 Design. So you can't really purchase Collaboration for Revit anymore. You have to get this new BIM 360 Design. But it does some of the same things where you've got this work in progress model just like Collaboration for Revit. But then when you publish to this design website, now we've got this thing where you can have different stages of the model. And without going too deep into that piece, there's a place where you can publish the model and that's where it's sitting, but then you can choose whether or not you're sharing that model with everybody else on your design team. And once you've shared it, everybody else on the team can choose whether or not they want to consume the model. And so there's this new way, and mostly in the design process, there's some really good reasons for doing that, some nice things that can happen for it, but it gave us this much more complex world. And add to that, as Autodesk was working through the programming interface that we can use to get to this, some things changed, where we had access to both the published and the work in progress model in the Collaboration for Revit, the prior mode. We didn't have access to that work in progress model in the new BIM 360 Design mode. So we have this type of matrix that we're looking at here where we always had access to the work in progress. We always had access to this published thing inside C4R team and stuff like that, but then it wasn't working. So the little tilde there that we've got for the published models in Collaboration for Revit BIM 360 team is we had access to that, but you had to make sure that it was published. And we had some fun things in Clarity that some of our owner clients were taking advantage of, where we would be able to automatically, through Clarity tasks, do that publishing for you. So every Friday, every day, whatever it wanted to be, we could make sure that the cloud website was updated. Now, all of this is going through, if you've ever heard it, there's this platform that Autodesk is building everything in the cloud off of called Forge. And as we're building up, as Autodesk is building up the Forge platform, we're continually adding features of what we can do with Clarity based off of what's available to us through that API, through that interface. So all of that was possible through the Clarity 2019.0 release. That's all the background. As Peter mentioned, I can get into the weeds. I apologize if I went too deep for you here. All of that's the background to get to the spot where the major impact that we had for the .1 release as it relates to BIM 360 Design is we now can get access to that work in progress model. However, there is a little bit of a caveat. It's only in Revit models that are version 2019, presumably, or later. The issue for that, for us to be able to get access to that model, we had to lobby Autodesk to make some changes to that Forge platform. And we put in some requests, some suggestions. We had our Clarity clients reinforce the need for those suggestions, and Autodesk built in that capability for us to be able to get access to the work in progress model, but only in Revit 2019 for those Revit 2019 or later projects. Autodesk has not committed to making that something that will be built into the 2018 software. So better support for how all these different things are going, better support for the BIM 360 cloud with those little bit of caveats in place. If you happen to be one of those owners that is using the Autodesk cloud to either monitor or track projects that are in design or construction inside your campus, your facilities, we've now got some better support to be able to work with those files. Knowing that that also gets into a little bit of a caveat again. If we go back a couple slides for a moment to this particular piece here, where in that blue box on the right-hand side, we had some different states for the model once it was inside that published area. We have also then built in some better support for managing those different states. When we set up a project, you can see that the little highlighted things on the bottom right-hand side is we have the ability to say, do you want to be able to let Clarity use the working copy? Yes or no? Do you want to hide those shared or consumed state models? Typically, our expectation is that you'll have these both set to yes. However, we're trying to build in and give some support for those things so that if you want to, you could have Clarity, look at the data, work through different tasks, only based off of what has been currently published, because the work in progress is changing too much, it's iterating too much. But the whole idea here is to try and work with these models in a better way. So as I'm going through here and we're taking a look at things, those are some of the major pieces that we have for changes inside the BIM 360 world for this design product that we have, what used to be collaboration for Revit, and just working with those models better. So I guess that'll be part one through there. And for what it's worth, you did hear Peter's voice early on. As we're going through here, he's basically the color commentator. So if I manage to pause for long enough for him to get a word in edgewise, we'll be adding some extra commentary through this in addition to helping out with Q&A at the end of the session we'll have here today.
I thought I had a free pass to just go get coffee.
Well, considering how much I don't pause from time to time, yes, that'd certainly be true. Going on from there, though, when we're looking at some different things, in particular related still to the cloud in this BIM 360 environment that we're working in, the last bullet point that we have down there, more awareness of task server expiration. We do have an issue. It's an ongoing and it's a consistent piece that we've got, where your task computer, this is the computer that has Revit on it that is doing all the heavy lifting for extracting data or publishing things out, whatever it might happen to be. That computer, to get access to all these things in the cloud, needs to be signed in and accessing those cloud models through an Autodesk ID, through credentials that you provide. There's currently a limitation where you will need to re-log in using those credentials every 14 days. And that's a limitation. It's built in. It's required by the Autodesk side of the software. And I can understand parts of why that would be the case. They want to make sure that it's something that's real, people really are actively using, or a service, in the case of Clarity, is still actively using that account to gain access to cloud material. I get it. But it's a hassle that every 2 weeks you or somebody on your team would have to go and log on to that task computer, launch Revit, say, hey, yes, Revit, use my credentials. It can be annoying. It can be a pain. So we've got a URL there that if you're interested in it, you could take a look at the idea that one of our lead developer, the director of our products division, Matt Mason, put together for allowing, putting something in the program interface so that on an automated basis, we would be able to auto-update that. So you could just set it once and then forget it, and then allow Clarity every 14 days to go through and revalidate the credentials. Clarity is still alive. Yes, we still need this But as it is right now, just a little bit of a reminder perhaps, or notification that we're working on doing everything we can. There's limitations within the Autodesk side of the software that they've put into place, perhaps for good reason, but we'd like to be able to make it easier on you. So all of that is what we've got for the grand, wonderful world of enhanced support for the Autodesk BIM 360 world. The other thing that we were running into is for a lot of our clients, owners, and otherwise that are running into different issues where you've got a lot of buildings. And when you've got a lot of these buildings that are sitting out there, managing all these tasks between these buildings can get cumbersome. So we put into this .1 release of Clarity what we're calling a task template, where you can define a task once and then assign it to multiple buildings. And as you're assigning it to different buildings, there's different filters and ways we can say which buildings we're looking at. But as we're applying it to the different buildings, if you need to change something about that task, we can go through and edit the task template, and it will immediately update the dozens or even hundreds of buildings that you might be tracking through this interface, instead of having to go through and make one change 100 different times. So we're calling it this item of below the fold as far as the parameters go. Well, in a minute here, we'll take a look at a Clarity website live so we can see what we mean by below the fold. But really what it comes down to is all the details of a task is what you can change. The items that are what we're calling above the fold are saying, well, what files am I processing? When does this task run? That will still be on a building-by-building basis of when do you want to run these things. And we'll get there live in just a moment. We'll see a few different things together. One of the other things that we started adding in for just an overall ease of use and streamlining how things are being used, this is getting a little bit of, again, diving into the weeds from a Revit standpoint. Some of the buildings you've got out there are really big, and some of the Revit files for those buildings are also really big. The default behavior that we've had in Clarity since the beginning has been when Clarity opens up a Revit file to process a task, it opens up all work sets. Work sets are ways that we can group things in Revit into functional working areas. Typical things will be like linked files will be in their own work sets, or as we're looking at different elements, you might have the shell and core of a building being in a work set, interior furniture being a different work set across all levels of the building, things like that. And we did that from a Revit standpoint. We opened up all of those work sets to make sure all the graphics were correct if we were doing things like publishing PDFs or extracting DWG data. Well, when you're doing that, though, it can make a task, a Revit something, take a little bit longer because we're opening up all of this data. You might not need all of that data to be able to perform whatever the task at hand is. Maybe if we're doing a data extraction, you only care about the current file, so we don't need to load all the links. So in the 2019.1 release of Clarity, what we've added in is the ability to specify which work sets do you want to open when you perform this task, so that when I'm doing that data extraction, I can say, don't bother loading all of my links, the not link starlink star option. We can say, don't load all these things so that that task, instead of taking maybe an hour to process, gets done in half an hour, 15 minutes. There's all sorts of different possibilities on how that could run, but it's getting into the nuts and bolts of how Revit works and doing what we can on the Clarity side to allow Revit to run more efficiently when Clarity is performing a task. So part two, performance. Getting back to a user interface for ease of use type of function, we've also added some color coding for tags inside your buildings. So we've got some specific categories that we can apply to Clarity. The stock categories that we have, they're hard-coded at this time, are going to be for version, what Revit version, project type, typically like is it a BIM 360 or is it a file-based project that's sitting on your file server, what office or building location is it, and then this generic catch-all called other. And we can start color-coding tags based off of where they are in this list so that as we're looking at these different types of functions, we can look at the tags and see them more easily. What the tags do for us is that they allow us, if you've got 50 different buildings that you're tracking inside Clarity, you can click on a tag, and only buildings that have that tag, that piece of metadata inside them, will be the ones that show up on your screen, so you can very quickly navigate to the building that you want to look at and start working through it there. So leaving that there for a minute, those few things we had from a fit and finish UI standpoint, I'm going to go ahead and switch over real quick to my current Clarity session and take a look at things through here. So we had mentioned some different items as far as user interface and maybe the tasks first. That's where we started off in this whole mess. But I'm going to go up to the very, very top of the screen here and go to my tasks. So this is global task editing. And when I'm in my global task editing section of Clarity, what that'll give me is the option to create a task that is just a standard task or one of the new task templates. So I'll come over, choose to set up my tasks, wait for that to go. This is actually kind of slow for me for some reason, but we'll get there. And then here's my tasks versus task templates. If I click on templates, and then let's say I'm going to do a new task template for my data extraction. I'll come down to the DB export task, choose that from my list, and then we'll see this pop up here. The line that we have at the top of the task area is this above and below the fold that we're talking about. So at the top, I can change the name to be maybe DB export and call this a template. The file, scope, all this stuff above here, the rest of this doesn't really matter too much because that will change on a building by building basis. The information below the fold is what will change. So if I say I want to do the default settings, we'll just leave that here for a minute. I'll go ahead and create that as a task template. And now as I go through and want to assign this, I've got my DB export as a template, and I can say, let's go ahead and assign this to, right now I'll just do all of my projects that we've got here. Click the update button, it says I'm going to add that one task to 11 different buildings, 11 different projects, and now that's everywhere. If I go through and change this now, I'll click on my edit link, select here, and I'll say, well, you know what, instead of all these things, I'm going to choose my exhaustive option. I'm going to pull out more data from Revit than I normally would, and I do care about material quantities, just as an example. I'll go ahead and do that, and when I hit the update button, I'll get warned and saying, hey, guess what? You're going to update this task across 11 different buildings. Do you want to do this? Assuming you mean yes, we'll say yes, and now that task is updated everywhere so that now whenever somebody runs this task, it will capture those additional settings, those additional features that we were looking at. The other thing that we'll have then that I want to point out here, when we're looking at the color coding for the different tags that we've got, I'll have an option here for manage tags. I'll only see this if I'm an elevated user, a coordinator or an admin administrator of the Clarity system. A standard user does not get this interface. But through here, I'll be able to have tags for the different Revit versions, perhaps, different project types that I mentioned, office or building locations. So maybe I want to have a new tag in here for Boston. We'll drop that into having it as a purple tag. Maybe I want to have something in here that will be Tampa. Drop that in. Add those as available new tags that have that purple color or whatever color we choose from this list. If I come into my custom tags, we can go ahead and start changing these. Maybe I'll add in a tag here that says this is going to be the classrooms for Classroom Annex. Add that as an available tag for my list through here. Now that it's been added in and we've got all these set up, I'll go ahead and click Done. And I don't have any projects right now that have this Classrooms tag. It's available for me, but if I click it, it kind of goes empty. So let me do this. I'm going to go back to all my projects. I'm going to edit this example project that I've got here, and let's assume that it is Classrooms. I'll come over and say, let's go ahead and edit my project settings, and I'm going to add in that tag that is Classrooms. Get to my settings through here, available tags, and Classrooms. There's my tag and update. Now that that's in place, I'll go back to my All Projects listing, and inside my All Projects, choose that tag now for Classrooms, and I will see my example project coming through. But the idea is we'll be able to better manage all the different tags so we can filter down to just those things we want to see, and we can color code based off of what type of tag are we looking at to get to those buildings that matter more for your current intent. heading back from there, back to the wonderful world of PowerPoint, there's a few other things that I wanted to point out of what we've got for the .1 release. And one of them, if we're looking at things through here, is this thing called Dynamo. Dynamo is a programming, a scripting language that works with Revit. It creates these graphs, these scripts that look like the screen cap that you see at the bottom of the page here. But the neat thing about Dynamo is for Revit users, it gives you a way that you can start programming inside the Revit world, kind of sort of similar to how you might have been using Lisp or VBA or something like that to program inside the AutoCAD world. And in Clarity, we've been able to automate running a Dynamo script, a Dynamo graph, in an unattended mode, just like all of our other tasks. But prior to the .1 release, we only supported up through Dynamo 1.3. Recently, Dynamo 2.0 was released. It was part of an update in the Revit world as well. And with 2019.1, we have added in support for both Dynamo 1.3 and 2.0. So from an owner standpoint, as we get into different things with Q&A and other places, I'll have my suspicion on whether or not this would be truly valuable from an owner standpoint. I'm leaning toward an idea of no for the time being, but that could change easily going into the future, and it also depends on what type of owner you are, how deep into Revit you are. If you're using ODP just to be able to get access to data and running on, Dynamo is not going to be a big deal. If you're an owner that is more active in Revit, then the idea of Dynamo and Clarity running your Dynamo graphs for you unattended on a scheduled basis could become very, very appealing. So some different possibilities. After that, just some general fit and finish types of items. We've got some performance increases. We've run into places where we've got some owners, some design companies, some various people who have been working on very large projects. And some of them have been kind enough to share those databases with us so that we could take something and, when we're working on small to mid-sized models and developing things in Clarity, we might think that performance is good, but then you take that same type of database function and pull it into a large project, we'll get into places where all of a sudden something that maybe took 5 seconds to run is now taking 30, 50, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to run because there's just that much more volume of data. So a lot of different web pages are reworked to run faster. We've done some database things to allow that to run better. And we were able to do that based off of some of our clients sharing their information from us. These things called data sheets where we can look at information about rooms, about assets inside your buildings, where you're now using a Chrome engine to print those data sheets instead of Internet Explorer, as it says here, faster and better. So some interesting things through there for us to be able to work with. Another item to look at is it just opened up, maybe even just last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. We got it out there for a community page for Clarity. So if you go to if you want to right now, http://imaginit.helprace.com. The idea here is that we wanted to provide a place for the community of Clarity users, both on the design side and the owner side, on the construction side. Anybody who's using any version, any aspect of Clarity can come to start gathering information. As such, it is super new. So there's admittedly, 2 weeks into it, there's not a whole lot of data out there yet. If we go look at what that page is all about, that's this other browser tab that I had open. But it's a place where we could start looking and say, hey, I've got a question. Go into different forums so that users can share information across each other. So if somebody's using Clarity SQL database information along with Tableau or Power BI, people that can share information back and forth. Because as IMAGINiT, we can certainly help out with those things, but we're not repping Tableau. So there's going to be some different types of things through there where you can share with the community to understand things better. If you wanted to know what has happened and what are the latest updates that are available, what are the things that have been patched or enhanced, added to any of these updates, keeping this information out there as well. So the idea is we want to start building up that community and getting people to talk with each other and utilize the whole community of Clarity people out there and collectively just get better about it. And then finally, there's just a whole list of other items that we have been touching on and helping over time. Getting some different things for rerunning tasks better, for better database views. One of the bigger things that, in my opinion, has an impact on our owner clients is about halfway down on the list, just after halfway, less database permissions, lower database permissions. Historically, Clarity had to have a service account that was a database administrator, and so it could do all the different things that we needed. We've managed to find some different ways to reduce that so you don't have to be a DB admin. And it might not be that database administrators still are completely pleased and happy with everything Clarity needs to run inside SQL, but we're a lot better than we were so that they don't hate us at all or hate us less as we're going through that. Some better handling of single sign-on when needed. So some good things to be able to help out with how we're working inside a more larger environment than just a smaller design firm, if you want to call it that. So good things through here, a lot of fit and finish items, a lot of things that didn't even make it onto this list, but trying to make sure that as we're going through continuing to develop Clarity, that we've got that interest in heart of what are we doing with the data, how are we working through things, and making sure that as you submit different ideas or questions to us through that portal, through that community page or other ways, let's make sure that we're getting things that make a positive impact on your life. Those are the things that we had from our side. I don't know, before we get into Q&A or anything through there, if from Peter, your side, you had any color commentary to add through this, since I really didn't shut up anywhere through there.
No, I actually don't.
Woohoo! But maybe we'll just take it off to Q&A then.
All right. Right now, I am actually not seeing any questions. So if you did have questions, now is a great time. One moment while I end today's recording.